Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. Get ready for an insightful and entertaining chat about the end times. Hey, we don't claim to have all the answers, trust me. But we will provide a good, stimulating conversation about the scripture as it relates to the end times. And tonight we're talking about the beast, the bear in Daniel chapter 7. Does it relate to Russia? Some people think yes. Maybe some people think no. Maybe it's something completely different. But that is going to be our topic tonight. So we are excited to get into that. And yeah, here we go. All right, fantastic. And we got everybody here. So awesome. Hey, John, so glad that you're here, brother. This is great. All right, I don't hear anybody else. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves and say hello to everybody, that would be fantastic.
Hello.
Hey, John. Very cool. All right. So
hello,
we have some
John.
special. Hey, there's
our most talkative panel member.
Yes, we've got some special guests. We have
Go ahead and introduce Gavin
and Gary. They're both going to be with us this evening, and Gavin's going to share some of his presentation on the beast with the 3 ribs in its mouth. So. Yeah, Gavin, if you're ready to get started, we can go ahead and walk through. If you just unmute yourself, you can walk us through your understanding of Daniel chapter 7 and the bear with the 3 ribs. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, that sounds fine, Doug.
Okay,
we'll see how we go.
Okay.
I've reduced the PowerPoint of the video I did 3 years ago on the full complement of about half of the G8 nations based upon Daniel chapter 7. And tonight we're going to concentrate on the bear, and so I just basically dropped it down to about 29 slides or something like that. So the question is, what does this second beast symbolize as we read it in Daniel chapter 7? And there is the full complement of the beasts that Daniel saw. He saw 4 beasts. He saw the lion with the 2 wings. He saw the bear with the 3 ribs in its mouth. He saw the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings of a fowl. And then he saw this 4th beast, which really terrified him. It was the 10-horned beast that he saw, the 4th beast that startled him to the core. So that's basically it. And we've got further mysteries unfolding with respect to the wings of the lion coming off the lion, and we'll find out where those wings went in another video, but we can't deal with that tonight. That's a fascinating story and very inspiring one. And then we've got the bear with the 3 ribs in the mouth. And they said to the bear, "Arise, devour much flesh." So here we have the second beast, a bear, and it's raising itself up onto one side, which suggests, perhaps moving, positioning itself against the west, although it did for a while have a war with Japan in the east. But basically, its preoccupation has been with the West. If we look back in history with Napoleonic wars, with Hitler's invasion into Russia and so forth, and also with the incursions of the Huns across the Caucasus into the West, and the story of Alexander the Great, who encountered the Caucasus Mountains and called them the Mountains of Brass. So,
hey, Gavin, let me stop you for just a second here, because I feel like we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. You're already assuming who the bear is. I don't feel that you've proven to me who the bear is. You're saying that the bear is positioning itself against the West. You're already making a presupposition of who the bear is, and you have not proven that from the text. So I'd love to hear how you prove. You're suggesting that it's Russia. So prove to me how it's Russia from the text. That would be really awesome.
Well, the the issue really is not specifically about the bear, but it's about the fact that we have to identify these four beasts as 20th century and 21st century powers. We have to do that.
Why do we have to do that?
Because of one word in Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, which is the word kodam.
Okay.
And if we can proceed on with the PowerPoint presentation, that will be made very clear.
Okay.
And here we have the leopard with the four heads and the four wings of a fowl. And that is another story for another time, but basically we've got some connections there which are very interesting. I'm not going to speculate at this point. I think we can all say that this fourth beast is pretty much indicative of an end-time entity related to the 10 horns and all the 10 toes of Daniel chapter 2. That's the only place in which Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 come into confluence. In other words, to say that Daniel chapter 7 is a recap of Daniel chapter 2 is a presumption based upon the first great commentator of the Bible, Matthew Henry, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We can proceed on here, Doug. So the presumption has been since Matthew Henry back in around 1700 that the head of the image that he saw of gold, which is we're told is Babylon, is the lion with the eagle's wings, and that the chest of silver is made of Persia, and that is repeated again in Daniel chapter 7 as the bear, and the midsection of brass is Greece, and that is repeated again with the leopard in Daniel chapter 7. And Rome, of course, now we're starting to get down to something that we can agree on. Rome being the legs of iron, and we're getting towards what is called the revived Roman Empire. Of course, we might not necessarily even have to use the word Roman here, but we're looking here at a 10-horned beast, which is there at the end of the age, which fits in with the 10 toes, which get struck at the very end of the age by the returning Christ. This has got to be an end-time story. So, yeah. There we have the 10 toes in Daniel chapter 2, and in Daniel chapter 7, the 10 horns. These are, we can say with some degree of assurance that these are equivalent. In other words, they're two stories of the same entity, or the same end-time political entity, which will rise up in the latter days, the New World Order beast. And so this, again, would be considered speculative. We know that there's a 10-horned beast in the latter days. Okay, we can say, well, does that apply to the final 7 years? If so, then who is controlling the beast in the first 3.5 years? Because we know very well who's controlling in the second half of the 70th week. It's the Antichrist when he's possessed by the beast demon of the abyss at the midpoint, abomination of desolation. So we're looking here at this first section in which we can speculate, and again, this is a speculation, that somebody has got to be ruling the New World Order during that period of time. Nobody in all of Bible prophecy wants to talk about this. And so since nobody else wants to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it. And I believe that it is worthy of consideration that the woman riding the beast during the first who is riding this 10-horned beast, she is riding during that first half of the future 70th week. And so we then have to consider what are those 10 horns. And of course, for the last 50 years, we've been hearing that is the revived Roman Empire in Europe, and it's all just the European powers. Well, that doesn't quite work, because now we've got more than just 10 European nations in the EU, and we've got all sorts of, Brexits and things about to happen. This is a more likely interpretation. And again, it's a speculation on my part. It's an interpretation, and it is. This map was made back in 1941. It was discovered in Pennsylvania in a bookstore, and it is obviously a plan by entities that we can only speculate about, who have planned to divide the world into 10 geopolitical regions, which we already have in the terms of banking, and already in terms of economic bioregions, and if you look there, you'll see NAFTA. If you look, there's no border between Mexico and the United States, is there? Or between the United States and Canada. This was planned back in 1941. If you look at the South America, the whole of South America is one entity. You look at Africa, where's South Africa? It's gone. And that's what we're gonna have to evacuate people out of South Africa because there's going to be a big race war there, which is already happening, just like happened in Zimbabwe. And so they're going to end up with an African Union in which there'll be no South Africa as we knew it. So we are looking at, where are we here, Doug? Oh, is that the next slide? This is the Daniel 2, a long view of world history. In other words, we can look at Daniel 2 at the image that Nebuchadnezzar had in his nightmare, and we can say with an assurance that this is a long 2,600-year story. No question about that. There's no speculation whatsoever. We have that well established, and most Bible scholars agree that this is a 2,600-year history. As for this, well, what are we going to say? What is the time period here? We have two ways of interpreting that, and we can say that these beasts existed in the past, as Matthew Henry had speculated and said in his first commentary. But remember that in the days of Matthew Henry, the unifications of Europe, the unifications of Italy, the unifications of Germany, the unification of the United Kingdom, the UK had occurred under Cromwell just a century before. But the big unifications that led to the big superpowers such as we have today did not exist in the days of Matthew Henry. And so he could not conceive of these entities here being end-time entities because he didn't have a view of the end-time superpowers such as we have today. So the issue here is, what does the word before mean in Daniel chapter 7? And so we are told that the fourth beast was more fierce than all the other beasts that were before it. And so the question is, what does that word before mean? So the devil is in the details here, right? So we've got a homograph, and a homograph is a word that can have two meanings, and it can be spelled exactly the same, but can have completely different meanings. And so that's what we have the word before. It is a homograph with two meanings. And so what has happened is that the Bible translators have taken one meaning of the word before and completely neglected the other meaning. So the question is, what does before mean? Does it mean before as in before in time, or does it mean before as in the presence of? So if it means before in time, well, then we can consider that the Medo-Persian, Babylonian, Greek powers of the past are being recapped in Daniel chapter 7. But if it means something else other than before in time, it means in the presence of, as in somebody appears before the judge or before the king. If it means that before, well, then there's a completely different meaning to it.
Hey, Gavin, I'm not aware of any time where Kedem or Kodam would ever be used as in the presence of. That would be like lifnei, before the face of. So this is either before in time or before in sequence. Like, I looked at my watch before the clock struck 12. This man was in line before, the next guy, right, in the sequence there. But as far as in the presence of, do you know, is there a reference for that? I'm not aware of any.
Yes, the next slide, Doug.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are two options. We can say before as in preceding in time, and it can be before as in the presence of. So let's move on to the next slide there, Doug.
Okay.
So the question is, which meaning of the word before would you like? Is it preceding in time, or does it mean in the presence of? So
Or in front
next slide.
of. There's okay.
Yeah, in front of. Yeah.
Okay.
So here we have here is what an old airline pilot told me about 20 years ago. And I just happened to get a hold of the information that he shared. And he made the point that the word kodam is the key here to understanding this whole issue. And it's heavily guarded. I don't deny that for 1 minute. It is extremely heavily guarded. There are religious spirits that do not want this information to come out. So I am fully aware of the pushback here. But here we're looking at Strong's word H6925, and it's a word kodam. And it's a Aramaic word, and it means, as we will see, the next slide, Doug. So it means in front of or in the presence of. In other words, personally in front of or in the presence of. So that is the clincher as far as I'm concerned. It
doesn't mean in the presence
that
of.
It means.
Hey,
That's
let
really
me interject with verse 17. Could you pull this up real quick? Because I figured that, I mean, I don't want to say figured it out, but this was simple to me as a kid. Pull
What
up
am I pulling
Daniel
up?
7, verse 17.
Daniel 7:17.
Yes, in every translation. So Daniel's given this vision. Belteshazzar is the king. And pick your translation, and what does this verse say? These four great beasts are four kings who shall or will arise out of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're the Hebrew, or probably have a little Aramaic scholarly to you.
Sure.
Every translation I've looked at interprets that as future tense, and this vision is given to Daniel while Babylon has already risen. So again,
Okay.
I actually agree with that Gavin's saying, but this verse is pretty clear. And then if we go on down after that fourth beast is destroyed upon the return of Yeshua, those three beast kingdoms actually get to continue on. So I mean, I just have never understood the trying to shoehole and pigeon in the I guess what you would call the four beasts of Daniel 7 into the statue, because that I think what we can see at the bottom of the 10 toes with Rome obviously never ever reviving. I differ with Gavin on that. There's no revival; it never went away. I mean, we still live in what would be the remnants or a morphed or a evolved Rome. Until Jesus returns. I mean, unless you're an amillennialist or whatever, and you think that the cross was when this occurred, which none of us on this panel are. So we would have to invite a special guest for that to present that side. Unless John wants to take up the devil's advocate side and argue that all this was fulfilled about 1992 years ago, and so.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Doug, we're not finished with this in the presence of story here, because we're not just looking at the Blue Letter Bible, and of course that's all I have. You know the Hebrew better than I do here.
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
I just look
presence
at the
of
Blue Letter Bible.
it's just a different word for
but
presence.
There's more
of.
to it than that.
Yeah.
What we need to look at is how that word kodam is used throughout Holy Scripture, right? Okay. We need to look at context, and more context, right? So let's move on here and let's see how the word is used throughout Scripture. And in every single case, it is used in terms of in the presence of, as in Daniel 2:25. We see that Daniel was kodam in the presence of the king. And there are other instances where similar situations are considered. He's in the presence of. And if you look at all the instances in which the word kodam is used through Scripture, It's always been in the presence of, and that is right in front of. In other words, in the same room with them, or in other words, in personal conversing company with them. In other words, they're not 2,500 years past. They are right there in front of you. So this is extremely spooky information, and you can understand why nobody wants to talk about it. You can understand why no commentator has mentioned it, and you can also understand why the international translations have deliberately, they knew the word kodam means in the presence of, but they deliberately said that, use words such as, I presented in the other bigger presentation on the UK and American Bible prophecy, they presented as in the same preceding in time. They're using words like preceding in time when they are not permitted to do so.
No, Gavin, it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. You've got options. Can somebody stop crinkling the paper, please? You have options, and you have to weigh the options. And sometimes the translators do the best they can. So I don't think we can start getting on a conspiracy here that they were doing something that they shouldn't have done.
Well, we've got modern translations, Doug, which have done disservice to the body of Christ, and I think to deny that is to be very, very kind to people who have not done their homework and they've taken scriptures out of the scriptures. They've misrepresented. They watered things down.
I would be very careful. Gavin, I'd be very careful if you're not yourself a linguist. I'd be very careful. So
I've read the books laying out these issues.
Just telling you.
And by linguists,
translation is not easy.
Linguists have written these books, Doug.
Yeah.
And if they have written the books and they have spoken to a simple, plain man like myself, I pay attention.
Okay. All right, let's keep going.
So, if these four beasts are three beasts are in the presence of the fourth beast, look, I understand this is heavy stuff. I understand this is really, really heavy stuff. I understand that. It means that the superpowers that we are having today are in some sort of a relationship, either a contentious relationship or a compromising relationship, or both, with the deep state New World Order. Now the question is, are we seeing that today? I understand it's hard to take. I really do. But we have to be bold here. We've got to be brave. We've got to move forward, and we've got to believe the scriptures as we see them unfold.
So what, I guess, sort of summarize for me what you're saying. You're saying that all four beasts exist at the same time at the end. Is that what I'm...
Yes.
Getting?
What's more, they have been in existence for the last century in varying degrees of form. We didn't have them in quite the degree that we have at the moment, but we do have them in pretty well recognized forms throughout the 20th century. But now it's getting to be quite obvious. We just happen to have identified half of the G8 powers that are in power today in the world, and they're written about 2,600 years ago by the prophet Daniel as he was visited in his dream. And it blows your mind. I know. It's extremely frightening. It blows your mind, but we've got to face what we have to face.
No, look at Revelation 13:2. It's not a coincidence that John is given this revelation about 1960, 1950 years ago. And it says, and the beast that I saw was like a leopard. We see the leopard in Daniel 7. And his feet were like those of a bear. We see the bear in Daniel 7. And his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And we see the lion. And then you have the dragon with the 10 horns. Essentially, what I know Gavin's position, because we've talked on it, is essentially this final he's calling it the New World Order. What I'm calling the final, I guess, beast kingdom, in which it truly will have worldwide authority, is going to subsume and consume and absorb these other three entities, beasts, into one, just like you see in Revelation 13. This tin horde beast that comes up out of the sea has all the characteristics of the other three kingdoms. And like I read earlier in Daniel 7, for whatever reason, these kingdoms survive. Just like we see in Revelation, where that beast is thrown into the lake of fire in Revelation, we see it in Daniel 7. But these other entities, these other beast kingdoms, they survive. So, I mean, I don't think it's that complicated, actually. I don't think it's that scary. Just Revelation 13 is just using the same beast from Daniel 7 and showing very clearly that this final beast kingdom kind of eats them up, if you will. They become part of this final entity, kingdom, beast, however you want to call it. I just don't think it's difficult. It's
The other thing is Daniel chapter 8, Scott. Remember that there's animal symbols here for Greece and for Medo-Persia, and they're quite different, aren't they? I mean,
Daniel 8's even
in Daniel?
freakier.
I'm in Daniel chapter 8. What is Medo-Persia? It's the ram with the two horns, right? And what is Greece? It's the he-goat. So if we're going to say that in Daniel 7, the Medo-Persia is one animal, and then the next chapter, the Holy Spirit jumps around and represents it as another animal, and the same with Greece. You know, Greece is supposedly the leopard, and then in the next chapter, Greece is the he-goat racing towards the east. So I don't believe that the Holy Spirit would be doing something like that, jumping around with different symbologies, one chapter apart.
All right, so finish on. You got like 7 more slides. Let's get through these.
Yes. Basically, the bear. Let's move on to go back to that one. Does that ring a bell? You guys are all Americans, right? Does that ring a bell with you?
There have been a lot of countries that have had an eagle, so I don't think that proves anything.
Yeah, it proves nothing other than coincidence. But I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah. So. Okay. Let's move on to the.
We become ethnocentric. We become ethnocentric, and we start thinking that everything that our country is doing must be what Scripture is talking about, and that is the inherent danger. Is that we start looking at it from our perspective, our timeline today, and of course our symbols. But we've seen these symbols throughout history, so this is why we have to be very careful. This is why I'm pushing back a little bit, because it's easy to just say, well, you know, if I look at the newspaper today, I'm going to identify this as, you know, the lion is England and the eagle is America. Well, I mean, I don't know. Eagle can also be taken as like a vulture or a condor or something. So maybe it's Bolivia. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
well, there is going to be. Would you agree, Doug? There is going to be an end time generation at some point in time.
Well, of course, obviously.
I mean, and again,
but we don't know when. We assume that it's going to be today or tomorrow, but we don't.
No, we don't assume today or tomorrow. We got at least a couple more years before 2 days is up.
Well, again, Scott, you know, I know that you are very gung ho about 2034.
I wouldn't say gung ho. I would just say the word.
But we don't know that. Okay, it's an interesting speculation, and who knows? Maybe you're right, but you could be massively wrong. That's where I think we'd be very, very careful, because somebody said in the chat, we heard all the same stuff when Mikhail Gorbachev was coming along. And I agree. We've heard these drum beats before. There's nothing new here. So, and, you know, and again, we know for clearly that the lion, the beast that's carrying the woman, I mean, I think I've proven that beyond the shadow of a doubt that was talking about Nimrod or Ninurta, who is carrying Ishtar. I mean, we have that in ancient iconography, right? We don't have to invent this stuff. You just have to go back and find it. right? So then we have to go with those symbols first and then say, okay, now is there a way that that could be interpreted within today in keeping that general context, right? So
Look at
that's
the
where,
symbols.
sorry?
Look at the symbols of our that's on the back of our dollar bill. We've got a giant phallic symbol as our nation's monument. I mean, the symbols are everywhere that we're an extension of Babylon and Rome.
Well, I'm okay that we can be an extension. That may be. We just have to. We just got to prove it first. And I just keep feeling like, Gavin, I feel like you're making assertions rather than proofs. Okay, that's where I would like to see the proof versus
Doug,
the assertion.
I'm not. I am making some strong suggestions, to be sure, but I'm not saying that thus saith the Lord. Okay, this is Bible prophecy roundtable, right? We're supposed to be looking at things and examining things because the Bible says, "Study to show yourself approved unto God," and He also says that the wise will understand. He also says that. Certain things are going to be sealed up until the time at the end. How close to the end do we have to get before we get what's going on around us? I mean, this is we've got a whole lot of people that just want to go to church and just get rubbed into their narcissistic ego and then go to the buffet. And here are we're losing 80% of our young people because they think our faith is boring. It doesn't have any guts to it. Doesn't have any nous to it. Meanwhile, the church in Indonesia has got 80% of it is young people under the age of 30. And we're losing our young people because we don't have the guts to say what needs to be said about making sure that we need to declare a blood covenant connection to our young people so that they know that we mean business and we're going to finish the race. If we're going to bow out and say that we're not going to finish the race, and we're going to just allow ourselves to eat a bunch of slop, religious slop, then that's not going to cut it. So when it comes to the issues of, look, the Hebrew word kodam, for example, in the presence of, I'm fully convinced that that's a valid, well, it's a little bit more than a speculation. It's a valid interpretation that is worthy of looking at. And if we don't have anything better to look at, I mean, we can't just say that Daniel 7 is a recap of Daniel 2. You wouldn't agree with that, Doug, would you?
Oh, I do think so. I think that Daniel 7 and Daniel 2 are very similar. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
well, I understand. Yeah.
We can disagree. I'm fine with that. But
sure,
so
we
continue
can
on.
But
go on with your
okay,
presentation.
let's go and let's see if we can see any other icons that might ring a bell. We're going to open The Economist or Time magazine. And what do we see? If we see a bear on a political cartoon, which country do we associate it with? I mean, is it crazy to assume that God anticipated this 2,700 years ago, 2,600 years ago? Is it too awesome to imagine that Daniel was given this information 2,500 years ago? Is it really too awesome? Yeah, it is too awesome. But the question is, we serve an awesome God, but how awesome are we going to allow him to be? How about this one here? I mean, it's a bit funny, isn't it? But when you see Putin riding a bear, you don't have to guess about what the bear is, do you? Or how about this one here? And how about the G8 countries and half of them being presented in Daniel chapter 7? I mean, how crazy, how awesome, how mind-boggling. And so that's where I wrap it up here, Doug. Shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase.
So
the book's shut up, and maybe we can open it a little bit. That's all.
So, Gavin, which four countries do you associate with each of the empires? Just so I'm sure I'm clear on that.
Okay. I've got 3 years ago, John, I put out a YouTube, which is called America, the UK, Russia, Germany, and France in Bible prophecy.
Okay.
And if you look through there, John, you'll see I try to make it as clear as possible. Yes, I agree. There's some degree of speculation, but there are some strange things. I mean, we're not supposed to be talking about the leopard tonight, but the leopard is very, very interesting. It's got 4 heads, and we've had 3 Reichs in Germany and the Holy Roman Empire, Central European powers being very powerful. And then the spots on the leopard, and the fact that the leopard makes lightning attacks. It is a very fine, well put together animal is a leopard, but it makes lightning attacks. It sits up in a tree and then it just comes in very quickly and very, very fast, takes down the prey. It's also got spots. So what might the spots be? If we look at scriptures, I mean, this is speculation. I don't deny this. If we look at spots in scripture, what do we see?
So the leopard would be Germany, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and you can guess what the spots are. What do spots symbolize in the scripture? Sin, right? Or shortcomings. Right. I've seen some very wonderful, godly Christian Germans in Europe, and they hang their heads over their history of the Holocaust.
Wait.
Wonderful,
how did we go from the leopard to Germany?
The lightning attacks, and also during World War II, they had.
So you're saying that the Blitzkrieg, because it's fast.
Yeah, it's classic leopard. And also, do you know how the Germans managed to keep their attack on for 3 days without sleep?
They were taking drugs. They were on meth.
Exactly. They were taking a drug called speed, or amphetamines, Pervitin it was called. The Germans knew about how to get their men to just push on. And if you can continue an attack for 3 days, you're going to just crush the enemy, because there's no chance for a regrouping or anything like that. You're just going to go right on through. So this is a characteristic of the Germany in history, the lightning attack, and the spotted history of the Holocaust. And
so you're saying the spotted history is where you get the spots. I don't know. That sounds like a stretch to me, Gavin.
I mean, it is.
It really does.
It's a stretch, but it's a decent. It's not an excessive stretch.
I don't know. It sounds like a stretch to me.
I've got a question for Doug here. Where in the world, anywhere, is Medo-Persia the bear? I mean, I have never seen, like, it seems to be your view is that they're almost parallel. And maybe I'm assuming that, but you're being pretty aggressive with our friend here on this. So I'm just wondering, do you believe that?
I want to see it proven in Scripture. That's what I want to see.
Well,
all right.
And he's using the verse on the before. I just took you straight to verse 17, where it says, "These 4 beasts shall arise." Right.
So here's what I would do. I mean, the way I'm looking at this is that these are kingdoms that were occupying Babylon. All right. And each of these kingdoms, you've got the Babylonian, you have the Assyrian, you have the Neo-Babylonian, the Persian, and the Greek, of course, then the Roman, right? They all occupied the physical area of Babylon, right? So that right there, it tells us that it has to be centered around the land to some degree. Yeah.
So the view would be that
not in Daniel 7.
Well, no, but looking at that plus in Revelation, right? So we're looking at what are going to be, what are these kingdoms that, the one that, the beast that was, is not, and will ascend, right? So we're talking about these 7 kingdoms. We have to look at what are the 7 kingdoms. I would put the 4 beasts here within those 7.
So Doug, just so everybody knows, we kind of summarizing the 4 beasts. The wing line would be Babylon.
Ancient Babylon. Yeah.
Right. The bear would be Medo-Persia because one one side was raised up stronger than the other. I mean, this is sort of the traditional view that we've been taught.
Essentially, yes, yeah.
And then the leopard, the four-headed leopard, would be Greece.
Yeah, because he's got the four heads, and then
and
it's so obvious.
When he died,
Yeah.
it's split. Well, you know, you can argue historically it ended up as four.
Yes. Right.
The Ptolemaic, the Seleucids, and whatever the other two were.
Exactly.
And then the last one would be the Roman.
Yes.
Okay, that's just that's where the like other view is.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think I try not to be too dogmatic, as you know, on these things, because Gavin is correct, Scott is correct, and Doug is correct. These prophecies will unfold in a real world with a real geopolitical context.
Yes.
And so I think it's fair to look at them in the light of our world when there's a lot of other things going on that we see. But I talk about every week, this convergence of everything that we see, especially, you know, the apostasy in the church and on and on. And, you know, we live in a Roman, you know, we live in a world where somebody thinks it's a good idea to send Kamala Harris over to do something in Europe on behalf of our country. That seems to be people not thinking when they do that. And so we live in just this crazy world where a lot of things don't make sense. And so I don't think it's unfair to look at these things in context. And I did a long thing in my update, I guess last Sunday, about, you know, some of the different views of Gog, Magog, sort of building on what Doug had said. But then others who say Magog is right, clearly, you know, they're very dogmatic about this, that it's Russia, it has to be Russia. And so I'm not opposed to considering all of these things. I also note that I talk a lot about logistics. And so I would just say, and so Gavin, in sort of response, if these are the four beasts that we see today, you know, they're not, for example, Germany is not a military power now. They have 50 tanks, maybe, if they're working. And we also see that, you know, Russia's kind of bogged down in they're having supply line problems. Their logistics aren't working for them. And I hear people in certain prophecy camps say, well, you know, Ezekiel 38, the Gog Magog invasion of Israel is imminent. It's going to happen any moment because, you know, Russia's on the move now. Well, they're not moving very well. And when you look at the reality is, you know, if they came down through Turkey to the Black Sea, to the Aegean Sea and across, or they come down across those huge Caucasus Mountains, you know, you're talking something that's going to be, you know, those are 1,200 to 1,700 miles. Well, they're having trouble making it 90 miles right now. So I think that kind of operates against it being imminent. But, you know, it could be too that Europe will get their act together now because they know that can't rely on America. America's not stepping up. So I think that there's a case to be made that this is possible. I'm just not dogmatic.
I'm not really a big fan of Germany ever rearming themselves.
No,
I don't know about you guys.
I'll tell you what, Germany is the financial powerhouse of Europe, right?
Absolutely. And Europe combined is bigger than the U.S.
I mean, they are masters at order, right? They're gifted by God. I believe that they're from the house of Gad, right? That's just another speculation. But their gifting in order is so magnificent. They are able to order. Like they gave us the Gutenberg printing press with their masterful engineering. They're able to put small print to make the movable print on the printing press, which gave us the scriptures. And we've been wonderfully blessed by Germany. in their sense of order, when they're not misbehaving with it, of course, but they are definitely the powerhouse of Europe with France. And I think there's the old Franco-German connection, which goes all the way back to the Franks. Remember, France and Germany were more or less linked up early on as they came and started to crystallize in Europe. And then France became unified first, and then Germany was a whole bunch of little fiefdoms before Frederick the Great, and then Bismarck, and then Kaiser Wilhelm in World War I. So we've got a German power which is not going to do what it did before with their military, but my goodness, they're going to do it with their what you call it, law. John, isn't it complex law or international law? The Germans are the ones that are doing it and putting it all together.
Well, then we can blame them for high billable rate hours. Praise the Lord.
The other part of this equation is the ancient East-West Roman Catholicism, Russian Orthodoxy schism, even within so-called Christendom. And I think Gavin likes to talk about the I guess what he calls the church and state / marriage all these years. But this is not a new schism, the East versus West. Obviously, in the East, we also have Islam now. So I just think it's not converged yet, as John likes to say. There's a lot of logistical things that would have to happen unless there's just nuclear war tomorrow or next week or next month, which we can't. None of us can sit here and say, no, that'll never happen. It could. We're not saying it is going to happen.
Yeah, and one possibility too is, one of the big concerns that people have is this asymmetrical warfare. So look at what's going on in Ukraine right now. So I think it's clear. It's hard to tell exactly what the truth is, to be honest, because everybody's throwing propaganda everywhere. But assuming that we're getting some semblance of it, Russia is bogged down, and with some what you might consider to be rudimentary weapons, javelin missiles, which, it's a complicated missile, but it's still something that somebody can, almost a couple guys can carry it around and fire it and take out tanks with it. And it's very effective at taking out the tanks. And then Turkey's also supplying these stealth drones to Ukraine, which is kind of interesting. So the technology allows a smaller army to punch way above its weight way beyond what you would normally think. So here's Russia with a powerful military, but they're bogged down. It appears. Now, I think they'll eventually get what they want, but this was not the 3 days that everybody thought they were going to do it. And now we've been at it for 2 weeks. As of today. So I just think it's the technology can change everything. The missiles, and this is why Israel's concerned about Iran, Persia, because of the missile technology and the fact that the right number of missiles can overwhelm the best missile defense systems. Missile defense systems are very spotty, except in the Iron Dome works well because of the type of missiles that they're shooting. But if you're talking about intercontinental ballistic missiles or something like that, missile defense doesn't work. It's a total bust at this point. So, So in a real world, the military strength can change rapidly because of the technology. So I'll grant that.
And then there's a morale problem too, John. The Russian morale is not good going into the Ukraine, and they were told, a lot of them were told that they were going in on an exercise.
Training mission.
They weren't actually told that they. Yeah. What sort of a leader would tell their men that, and then have their men realize that they've been betrayed?
Well, as long as everything goes okay, it doesn't make any difference. But it didn't go okay. And
Yeah.
and the other thing, I mean, you have these demographic issues that are facing some of these countries, like all of Europe. Germany has a low birth rate. Russia has a low birth rate. 40% of the Russian army or Russian armed forces is Muslim today. Between 20 and 25% of Russia population is Islamic. So that's another factor that you have to consider in all of these things. So
Gavin, help me understand, if Russia is the bear, the biblical bear, not just, I know the pictures, I totally agree with you. Obviously, it's all over in our modern day iconography. Would that mean that Russia is also Gog, or is that how you would equate that?
That gets to be
38, 39, kind of the Russia invading Israel scenario, or how do you play this out?
Well, the legends, the medieval legends that relate to Gog are just astounding. The fear that Europe had of those people beyond the Caucasus Mountains was just, it was legendary. It was a deep, deep fear of those people. Even Alexander the Great, when he took his army towards the east, he took all of Medo-Persia and basically he went into each city and he said, look, pay your tribute. We'll do this for you. We'll do that. We've got architects to help you to do this. We've got engineers to help you to do that. And basically he took over by culture as well as by military. So when he got to the Caucasus Mountains, that game was up. He couldn't continue to do that. And the people in the Caucasus Mountains are fierce. They are the harshest of the hard shell of the Gog people, if you want to call the Gog people the people up north of the Caucasus, in the Russian steppe. There's no place to hide on the Russian steppe. There's no place to settle. There's no place to feel secure between rivers and mountains. And nurturing people are not going to stay there. And so even though it was Josephus who said that the lost tribes were up north of the Tigris River, up there around the Black Sea, in numbers that couldn't be counted. They didn't stay there. God's people didn't stay there because they didn't want to be in that area. There was no security. A huge bunch of nomadic people could appear on the horizon without any warning, and you would be toast. So the movement was to the west, and Yair Davidi, as we've seen, has presented some excellent evidence that the lost tribes went west and crystallized in their Western European countries. So there is this issue of what's going on up there north of the Caucasus. It's so frightening. Well, that's where the Huns came rushing through, the Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun. These people were frightening. And if you look at the Silk Road on its way east, you'll notice that it didn't extend north of the Caucasus. It stayed in India and moved east, and it tucked itself in behind the Great Wall of China, so that it would have some protection from these wild Gog people of the steppe.
So to be fair, I mean, Josephus is of course speculating. I very much appreciate Josephus. He's an incredible historian. There's no question about it. But in this one, he was talking about the Scythians who were attacking the Roman Empire. They were not attacking Israel. And I think that is really a cheat if we don't consider that. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
He was saying that they're going to attack the Roman Empire, that they did. Okay. And I think that utterly fails, because God said that God had prophesied in all these days before. So again, if we're going to make the equation, so God has been sending his prophet after prophet to talk about Russia or Putin. Is that what we're to conclude here? I'm a little bit. No. I don't think that at all. I mean,
you talk about the Scythians, Doug.
Yeah, that's what Josephus was talking about.
There's good evidence that in amongst the Scythians were the lost 10 tribes, and also among the Parthians as well. They were in there.
Of course, I'm not disputing
the wise men.
I'm totally
The
fine
wise
that
men came out of the east were also from the lost 10 tribes. So it's not as if they were always all 100% Gog people, but by the time the good people
what are
left
Gog
and gone west,
God's people or Gog's people? G-O-G. Are you talking
Gog,
about
the Gog
so they're
people.
Gog
Remember, the
people?
Gog people are there at the end of the next millennium too, Doug, right? Because
Well,
they
so
are.
but again, if you understand that the word Gog means death or enmity, then
Yeah,
it
it's bad
solves the whole
stuff, right?
problem, right? I mean, it solves the
Oh,
problem.
yeah.
This
Children,
is
hey,
talking about
y'all quit cutting each other off, okay?
Okay, so Scott cuts us off to tell us to not cut each other off. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I'll remember that.
Well, no, look, I'm glad that we're all passionate about our views, and look, I don't claim to have the final word on anything either. Okay, but I've also done my research, and when we go back linguistically, we see that the word Gog, we go all the way back to Sumerian. You can't go back any further than that. Like that's like bedrock. That's it. Okay, and this word meant death or enmity, and God said that He was prophesying for years by all of His prophets about this one who was coming. That person is identical with the beast, the Antichrist, same exact guy, right? And the woman that's riding the beast, that is an icon that we find way back there, at least 2300 BC, where you find a lion with wings, sometimes known as a griffin, sometimes known as the Ushumgalu, the Mushhushu, right? All these different names for this. It's really a coming together of the great dragon, the red dragon, which was spoken of as Satan, and some individual known as Ninurta or Nimrod, right? It's all in there, right? So what I would encourage us to do is to say, let's start with that foundation and then work our way forward, instead of just saying, well, we see these symbols and such a country has the lion. I mean, okay, so countries have lions and countries have had eagles, but we're not the only country in the world that's ever had an eagle. The Roman Empire had an eagle. I mean, the Nazis had an
Germany's
eagle.
Got the
It
eagle
doesn't
with the
prove.
two heads. Yeah,
We're suggesting
an extension.
We're suggesting that
of Rome.
correlation is causation, right? That's the thing we have to understand. It just there may be a correlation, but it doesn't prove causation, and that's where I feel like we've got to be very careful, especially as teachers. We've got to be careful to prove the causation. Otherwise, we're just speculating, and anybody can speculate. So, where's the causation on these things?
I think we can all agree. Gavin, hold on a second. I think we can all agree that the fourth in the statue, the iron legs that then became, then becomes in essence the feet and the 10 toes. We can all agree that was Rome. It was divided into an east and a west, and Rome has not been yet crushed unless you're an amillennial type person. In other words, the stone without hands has not come down and crushed those feet yet. So my understanding would be is America is Rome, England is Rome. Everything in essence is an extension of Rome, just 2,000 years further removed since the time of Yeshua. That's why we see a lot of the same symbols that, again, like you were pointing out, Doug, that can be traced back not only to Rome, but to Greece, to Medo-Persia, to Babylon, to Egypt, and all the way back to Samaria. It has many different faces, but behind the mask is the same being and entity. That's where we 100% align, actually.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly. Thank you for making my point that that everything centers around the literal, physical, locational Babylon. Okay. Well, again, I'm not saying it has to be. Well, no, look, Scott, I'm not saying that. Well, I do personally think that there's going to be a city. Okay, but take it whether it happens or not. Let's take the Hollywood model. Okay, if you go to Hollywood as a tourist, you're incredibly disappointed because you're like, that really is really just a dive. But Hollywood, the influence, Hollywood, the system, that's everywhere. Okay, and so that's what I'm really getting at is that Babylon, the system, that it all started in Mesopotamia, obviously, right? We can't ignore that. We cannot divorce these things from that area. And keep in mind that God is still quite wrathful against Babylon. He still has a vendetta against Babylon. So he's going to destroy something in a spiritual sense, in a systematical or a system sense, but he's also going to destroy it in a physical sense, right? So there has to be something that we, some place that we can actually discuss. Now, could America be part of that? Sure. Could Germany be part of that? Sure, I'm fine with that. Is Rome part of that? Maybe. Okay, but I don't think that any one of those places are the place. I think they are part of the system, and that God is still going to bring this very specific judgment, right? And when we have the iconography that's telling us, it's pointing us right back to that place, we cannot ignore that. So, as we start looking at our modern day geopolitics, we got to temper those things in accordance with what was happening in the ancient world. Otherwise, I think we're not doing good scholarship, in my opinion.
And I think, like I posted, I put up Joel's little comment that the rabbis, for years and years and years, have always said that Esau is Rome. It's where Babylon became Medo-Persia, Greece, and it's the I guess what you would call the political entity. When I'm talking about Babylon now, as contrasted to Rome or the beast or the political system, Gavin mentioned it earlier, but that would be the apostate, not necessarily the apostate church, but she wears many dresses. In other words, she Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, some of the New Apostolic Reformation, some of your crazy, more very out there liberal, believe in Jesus and live how you want to. But I look at Babylon more as the mystery Babylon, the religious system, and Edom or Rome or the political system. They're all mixed in together, but sort of two separate types of entities, if you will. One spiritual, one political, but definitely in bed with one another. So
right, and you will not find you will find tremendous anti-Semitism within the Russian Orthodox Church as well, and that's driving a lot of what Putin is trying to do right now. So, for what it's worth,
yeah, we've got evil entities, and in amongst those evil entities, God has got His people, and if we say that Gog is a diffuse spiritual entity, then there's no geopolitical information there that we can lay a hand on. What we're learning about in Revelation 20 is that at the end, Gog attacks the covenant people of God and the holy city, right? So there's got to be a millennial rebellion, even though the beast, the devil will be in the abyss, and the world order will be under Messiah. So what can trip you up, the world, the flesh, or the devil, right? So there's the clue to the Gog people. They are not necessarily held up by the fact they're not actually made evil by deception, as the devil is the deceiver, right? They're not made evil by the world system. They are inherently, as people, flesh people. The world, the flesh, and the devil, right? The flesh is the only thing that can trip you up in the millennium, because you've got no excuse to say, oh, the world system was bad, and as a result of that, I turned bad. Or you can't say, oh, the devil made me do it, because the devil's in the abyss, right? So what can trip you up in the millennium? The flesh. And there's your clue to the Gog people. The Gog people are people of the flesh. Alexander the Great couldn't deal with them. And the Gog people are at their worst right at the head of where they're impacting Europe, in the Caucasus region. Albania was a place where
Gavin, you're making
never...
Look, you're making the very strong case that Gog is Russia. You're making this case, and I don't think
not necessarily, not completely, because Gog,
but you say
at the end
Gog
of the
people,
age,
Didn't you just say
Yes,
that? I mean,
I'm saying
okay.
that there is up north of the Caucasus.
But that's all based on
spirit.
Josephus about the Scythians, and that has
No,
hardly been proven.
The Scythians were a mixed bag, because in amongst Conan the Barbarian were some of the lost tribes of Israel, right? And they ended up moving to the west. But what's left behind are people in the steppe. And I can tell you this: during the Chechenian War, just back a few years ago, there were people caught in between the Russian lines and the Chechenian lines. And when the Chechenians were caught between their own lines and the Russians, guess which side they ran to for cover, for protection? They ran to the side of the enemy, the Russians, because they knew that their own people, so bitter and harsh and hard, they would not be treated very well at all. And also Albania was once in the Chechenian region before moving further to the west. The people of that area have a notorious history of being very, very harsh people that you just don't want to move against. We've even have psychosexual reveries by Western women of wanting to go up over the Caucasus to those people. Women with rape fantasies. These were the most carnal, harsh, fleshly people. These Gog people up there that you could ever imagine, and they will be here during the millennium, even though Messiah will be ruling, and even though the devil will be in the pit.
Gavin,
so we're looking at a flesh. We're looking at a flesh thing.
Wait. You're saying that there's a people in a specific area that are real assholes, and I don't think that is a proper way to do this. I really don't.
Well,
you're suggesting that a geographic area that there's a people, just because Josephus didn't like them, and just because Romans thought anybody beyond their borders were not real humans, that they were barbarians. I totally disagree with that. I totally disagree with that. And I think you're making a very, this is a very racist kind of argument that you're making. I just don't think that's,
look,
let's be fair. Wait a second, Gavin, wait, let's be fair. Look, I think what Russia's doing is an atrocity. Okay. But can we just suddenly say that everybody there is part of the Gog people and that they're all really bad? No, probably your average Russian's a pretty nice guy on average. There's a certain leader there who's a real jerk, okay? And I think he should be dealt with. But that's not to say that there aren't really wonderful people who are in Russia, okay? You're muted, by the way. Okay, so, I'm
not saying
but you keep saying it. You keep saying it. You keep saying those Gog people up there in the steppe area, that they're really bad folks. And I disagree with that. I think this is where you start getting in. Gavin, stop, please. Will you, for a second? I'm talking. Okay, this is where you have a problem, because you're now saying that this particular group of people are bad. They're evil. And I don't know, the whole world to me looks like we've got a lot of evil people, and that people can choose. And we're going to see that from all over the world, people are going to come and they're going to join, not to a Gog people. They're going to submit themselves to this leader known as Gog. Yes. Who I have proven linguistically again and again. I've proven that Gog is Satan. Okay, I don't know how else to make that any clearer to you, but Josephus was absolutely wrong when he made the suggestion that the Scythians were the Gog and Magog people. I mean, that was just a baseless thing he made. Okay, but again, he was really good on Jewish history, but he was a little, out there on some of these other things. So,
John, what say you?
I'm waiting to see how it plays out. Even though I put the bear, even though I put my background up with the bear and the Russian flag. So
hey, on this issue, Gavin, I love you, brother, but I gotta agree with Doug. You cannot start like doing this. You're muted still, Gavin. That's why we muted you, so we would stop talking over one another. But on this issue, you cannot label a people group. It will lead to racism, just as, we're seeing
not what I'm doing.
We're seeing as the Eastern Orthodoxy right now. Doug mentioned it. There's a lot of them that are very anti-Semitic. You have in the Hebrew Roots movement, they come in and then they start calling everybody that claims to be a Jew or descended from Judah fake Jews, no matter what the people group. And I don't think there's a Gog people. I think I Doug's convinced me on that one with his research.
Okay, can you just listen to what I'm saying here? I'm not saying the Russians per se are a Gog people. Okay, I'm saying that up there in the Russian steppe, underneath that principality, there is an engendering of people that we can call very fierce people who were feared all through the medieval era. They were absolutely petrified of those people. When they came through, you just had there was no mercy. There was there's no recourse for anything other than the fact that you were going to get run over and killed. So that was the history that we've got to look at. Medieval history is worth looking at. And it bears record of a terrible fear of people up north of the Caucasus Mountains. And I'm not saying that all Russians are that way at all, because Russians are a mixture, just like the Scythians were a mixture. Because people are in mixed groups, and then histories push them apart, and they tend to crystallize where they feel comfortable. And that happened look at Esau, for example. People say, oh, well, Esau is back where on Mount Seir. Go back to Mount Seir and see if you can find any Edomites there. Well, yeah, people could say, oh, well, a few Palestinians, right? Look, the Edomites migrated west into the fat places of the world, just according to what their daddy told them. Isaac said that you will live in the fat places, and by your sword you shall live. And Esau moved along with us. And whenever there's a terrible killing, who's doing the killings? It's a white guy, right? Who's doing the mass killings? It's a white guy. And this would be the Edomite spirit. This is not a racial thing at all. I'm not a racist, and I resent being called a racist. I'm talking about a spirit that hovers over people and makes them do things that are evil. You can get an Edomite saved, yes, but under the Edomite spirit, they're going to do things that are terrible. And that's what we've been seeing in the West. We've seen these mass killings by white guys. We know that half the killings in this country are done by another race, but nevertheless, when it comes to mass killings, it's white guys that do it. These would be the Edomites. Now, am I saying that we as white people are all Edomites? No, I'm not. Am I saying that all Russians are all Gogites? No, I'm not. I'm saying that up there in the northern steppe, history reveals that there was, and there continues to be, a spirit which engenders a people that you don't want to mess with, and they will show you no mercy. And that's the story of Jason and the Argonauts. You know, he went into the eastern Black Sea. That was the ultimate destination, right? So yeah. We've got legends, we've got histories, all indicating that there's something going on there that is very, very fearful. And am I saying that all Russians are Gogites? No, not at all, because there's the white Russians that have got a wonderful tradition, St. Petersburg and so forth. We've got Putin lighting the candles in the Eastern Orthodox Church. You say, well, you know, he looks like he might be a nice guy, but you know, what side of Putin are we looking at? Are we looking at the Gogite side of Putin, or maybe he's going to be tilting towards the West and he's worried about what we think of him? You know, we can pray for Putin. You know, yeah. I'm not saying that somebody, a racist people, is a Gogite people. I'm saying that there's a Gog spirit that hovers over certain parts of the world. And at the end of the age, they're going to come from all four quarters of the world and attack a city. They're not going to be related to one particular geography at that particular time.
And certainly there's, you know, principalities and powers that are battles against principalities and powers that are spiritual, but those manifest themselves through world governments, where they take on sort of predominant characteristics. And we talk about, you know, we can talk about all sorts of evil. We haven't even mentioned the wars of Islam, which rolled over most of the known world in 100 years and took it over. And we're knocking on the doors of Vienna for, I don't know, 500 years or more. And they were beat back by Charlemagne and in France, but they had Spain for till 1490 until the 1400. So I mean, and those were evil people. It's just like the Babylonians came and took over. They were pretty brutal. The Assyrians were probably even more brutal. I'm sure there were nice Assyrians. I'm sure there were nice Babylonians, but the government was the one that did the judging, and in that case, the judging of God's people.
Yeah, well, we've covered a lot of ground tonight. It's been a lot of fun. Gavin, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate that.
Thank you for being brave to share your perspective. I don't buy a lot of it.
For the record, I agree. I agree on the bear and probably Russia if we're actually at the end of this stage, but not necessarily the latter part of Gavin's presentations.
You know, the Lord's going to come and straighten us all out. That's for sure. You know, but I think what we can take away with is, well, let's keep studying. All right. Let's all keep studying. Let's keep listening to one another. And, you know, at the end of the day, Yeshua is going to come and he is going to set up his kingdom. And there certainly will be an end times bad guy, just like he said there was going to be. And probably a whole bunch of people will be involved with this particular leader, and we'll do some bad stuff. Okay, so that's kind of the bottom line here. You know, what can we do about this? Well, we can live righteous lives. We can be good neighbors. We can be generous and give to people in need. We can give to various charities. If you want to give to Ukraine or whoever, of course, you know, find a way to do that, right? So there are practical things that we can do to really be the hands and feet of our Messiah today. And I tell you, when it all comes and happens, we're going to look in the scriptures and be like, well, there it is. It's, you know, it's so obvious, right? But right now we're half blind and we're trying to figure it out. So again, Gavin, thank you. And of course, I want to thank my two wonderful co-hosts for their insights and exciting discussion. So guys, we thank you for all of your comments and questions. We did our best to kind of weave them in as we could. But sometimes we don't have time to get to all of them. If you want to get more content, every week I have here stuff at Doug Hamp, youtube.com/Doug Hamp. So check it out. Make sure you subscribe. Please do like this. That really helps the algorithm. You know, click the little bell as well. And share this with your friends and whoever you think needs to see this is really helpful. So until next week, may God bless you.